All right, we will be live once you hear the recording notification.
This conference is being recorded. Only the main conference is recorded.
Call to order the Underground Safety Board for April 8th. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 1:02. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll? Charland?
Here.
Johns?
Here.
Johnson?
Present.
Munoz? Present. Voss?
Here.
Thank you. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we gather today on the ancestral homelands of the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors and for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. In the event of an evacuation, please proceed out of the auditorium back to the back of the room, walk through the lobby to exit the building. We'll return to the auditorium and resume the meeting when the emergency is all clear. All right, I would like to welcome everyone here today. This is a beautiful facility. I don't know if you had a chance to go outside and check out the fossilized gas pumps. That's always my favorite part about coming here. So just to review our standard procedures, we'll review audience participation and public comments. In person, if you would like to speak, the two podiums are there. We can use either one, I believe. Oh, just that one? Okay, that one's my favorite, but we'll use that one. You can walk up to the microphone, and then, there'll be a little button there. Just push that. You'll get a green light and go ahead and speak. So that means I expect there to be the members of the public who want to talk today. And for those of you attending via webinar who wish to publicly provide their comments, you may press the raise your hand button and Rain will answer your call and put you in the queue. You can unmute yourself by pressing the #2. When staff calls your name, you'll go ahead and make your comment. All right. And with that, we'll go ahead and proceed to any public comments that are not on the agenda today but are within the board's jurisdiction. So if you have any public comments, go ahead and come to the podium.
Good afternoon. My name is Chu Mankau of Port Long Beach Surveyors, and I am lead with the team that deal with dig alerts to provide the dig alert service within the Port Long Beach, the Hobby District. This may or may not be the body which I'm asking for your help. We receive about 100 tickets every month. I would say 5% of those are emergency tickets, and about half of those are not really truly emergency. So I'm here to ask this body, or maybe the body that maybe you supervise or direct, to help us to somewhat enforce or maybe minimize those non-emergency tickets. Thank you.
Honorable members of the board, my name is Dave Woolley. I've spoken at meetings in the past. I noticed that you guys have formed, the board has formed a GIS subcommittee, and I'm really glad to see that. One of the things that I spoke about in the Long Beach meeting was the need to have a standard in place for the GIS, a standard of accuracy. And there's various standards, but we don't have any right now. And so what that means is that the GIS system the information put into the GIS could be used with a handheld phone, which could be off as much as 10 meters or 30 feet. And the understanding that GIS in GPS is centimeter accuracy or golf ball accuracy size. And so if a contractor believes that this came out of a GIS using GPS, that they know where it is, and they're going to dig very, very effectively, and that line shown in a GIS could easily be 10, 20, 30 feet over there. So when we're looking at it 18 inches either side of the line or 48 inches either side of the line because it was GPS or it's in a GIS, we're creating a situation that I believe is more dangerous than somebody who says it's somewhere within this lane and hand digging, so on and so forth. So I would ask the board and the subcommittee to please look at putting in some GIS accuracy standards. Thank you for your time.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Steve Cleaver. I'm the manager with Pacific Gas and Electric Company's Damage Prevention and Compliance organization. Wanted to bring a couple of things to the board's attention for consideration. The first, I've got them split into two topics. The first is decisions by operators or their representatives to not mark a location when they believe a site has been over delineated or the method of delineation does not meet their requirements. The second is the marking of subsurface installations by engineering firms, not the operator, using the universal color codes of operators for marking. So the first topic, requiring a trench line or bore path for delineations for marking utility installation jobs. I have, as an operator, a representative of an operator, and also representative of a group who excavates, have received complaints on both sides regarding utility operators or their representatives, contract locating companies that are choosing not to mark unless sites are delineated specifically, identifying a bore path or a trench line. These jobs often indicate on a USA ticket that boring or trenching will be the method of excavation because of the way that a ticket is structured, but that is generally not the exclusive method of excavation. Unfortunately, what happens oftentimes is a utility contractor or locating contractor will refuse to mark a site unless a trench path is expressly given, even though the scope of work may be much more than just installing a single utility in a trench path or even the laterals. An example of this would be a gas pipeline replacement project, where the original pipeline is being abandoned and a new pipeline is being installed. In cases like that, yes, you will be boring to install the pipeline and the laterals, but there's also much more work that's happening, including the digging of bell holes for abandonment to make the old abandoned line locatable in the future, to follow the federal requirements for what abandoned is. So there are several things that are happening, but the contractor is refusing to mark a site unless you specifically provide them with a trench line, and it's because the method of excavation was identified. Unfortunately, this often leads to significant delays in the project. The utility operator, the excavator, is unable to start their work until all utilities have been identified, and these can become very contentious over time. Now, I will tell you, as a utility operator ourselves, our crews and our contractors will often over-delineate a job, making it much larger than it needs to be. And we do have some improvements as an operator ourselves and other operators in reducing the scope of that work to just what's necessary. But simply providing a trench line or a bore path isn't reasonable, and asking the board to investigate similar situations like this and what the appropriate response would be for a locator, utility operator in that situation, or the excavator who's installing those lines. How does it need to be delineated? The contention comes with the definition of delineation in the California Government Code, being very specific to reference Common Ground Alliance Best Practices Appendix B, which provides examples of how an excavator may delineate, but it doesn't define exactly how delineation shall be made. And that's what's being relied on by the utility locator, saying, well, you have to delineate like this, or we can refuse to mark your site, and it's creating the challenges. So asking the board that the board would take that under consideration for future review. The other topic is the engineering firms marking utilities in the APWA color code. There have been a few times recently, one was brought up this past week, that engineering firms doing design jobs are marking exclusively in the colors of the commodities on the ground. So marking fully in yellow, fully in red, fully in blue, fully in green, for the utilities as they are engineering and surveying a job. Let me first say I am very grateful that they are going through the SUE process, surveying it, going through the engineering and design process prior to beginning excavation. But unfortunately, the marking in the color code becomes challenging because this work is not for excavation. This work is for planning and design. And in areas where there are active USA tickets or planned excavation in the work, those marks can be misconstrued as those being placed by the utility company, misunderstood as being a positive response by placing paint on the ground. And often those are not made with the records available to utility companies and can be inaccurate. And while this has been a topic that was raised and investigated by the CARGA, California Regional Common Ground Alliance, it was not something that was resolved on an industry-wide level or at least a statewide level, and requesting that the board evaluate that as time permits to provide guidance for engineering firms on the best practices for marking these without having those marks mistaken for marks that are placed for excavation purposes. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your in-public comments. Rain, are there any webinar comments? Let's give them a few minutes to raise their hands if there are any.
At present, there are no webinar comments.
Okay. We have 22 participants. Going once? Okay. We'll go ahead and close off any webinar comments. All right, we'll move on to action item 3. The next item before us is an action item to approve the minutes from the January 8th meeting. We'll go ahead and start again with public comments. If there are any in-person comments about the meeting minutes from the January 8th meeting, go ahead and step up to the podium. Seeing that there's no comments, we'll move on to the webinar.
At present, there are no webinar comments.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the board. Board, are there any corrections to the minutes that need to be made, or do the minutes look good? If so, I'll entertain a motion to accept them as they are presented today.
Madam Chair, I move that, make a motion that we accept the minutes as been presented.
Madam Chair, Member Voss, I second those.
All right. Seeing there's no corrections to the minutes and that I have a motion made by Member Johnson and a second made by Member Voss, I would ask that Madam Secretary please take roll if you would vote yes, no, or abstain.
Charland?
Yes.
Johns?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Munoz?
Yes.
Voss?
Yes.
All right, so the motion carries. All right, let's move on to action item 4 on the agenda. The next item before the board is an action item on the resolution number 240401. Staff will present an annual review of existing board policies with proposed amendments to policies for adoption by the board. Mr. Marino, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Madam Chair. So every year you review the new policies, or you review your existing policies for any potential changes per the review frequency that's listed in the policies. This year we propose to consolidate the legislative framework policies into a single policy that, instead of listing all of the relevant statute and regulations verbatim, just identifies the list. And this legislative framework is important in safety management systems because it clarifies the laws that support or inform the safety management efforts of the entity who's concerned. So our goal is to discuss changes and potential changes at the beginning of each year. We have an item and a couple items where we do talk about one of the bills related to potential changes. And so that's what we're proposing going forward, to repeal the existing legislative framework, which includes the text of the laws and regulations, and replace it with one legislative framework policy which identifies the purpose of the policy and lists those particular statutes and regulations that are being used as the framework. And we're asking for your approval. Thank you.
All right. So we'll proceed to public comments. I think there was a packet in the back for item number 4. Hopefully you had a few minutes to review it. If you have any public comments about item 4, you may proceed to the podium. All right. Are there any webinar comments?
At present, there are no webinar comments.
All right, thank you, Rain. All right, so staff is recommending consolidating the board's legislative policy from 5 policies, which are listed in our packet on page 2. L01, L01A, L02, L02A, L03 to one policy, which is L00. We'll go ahead and proceed on to board comments about this. Staff does propose no changes to the other policies. Who would like to start the discussion? All right, if there's no discussion and we would like to accept the recommendations made by staff, I would be ready to entertain a motion.
Member Voss here, I'll entertain a motion. I move to consolidate the board's legislative policies from 5 policies currently, L01, L01A, L02, L02A, L03 to one policy, and to not include the text for the reference laws by passing resolution number 24-04-01.
Thank you, Member Voss. Do I have a second?
Madam Chair, I'll second that motion.
All right. We have a motion on the floor. It's a very long motion, but I won't repeat it all. Hopefully, Madam Secretary has it. I have a motion and a second. We'll go ahead and proceed to roll call.
Charland?
Yes.
Johns?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Munoz?
Yes.
Voss?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Item 5, the next item is an information item on updates from the Regional 1 call centers on their metrics and activities. The call center metrics and updates will be presented by either Mr. Wingate or Ms. Diamond today. Oh, Ms. Diamond. So if you would step up to the podium and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just some highlights of the information. For DigAlert, 2023 ended for our second year where we processed over 1 million tickets in a calendar year. USA North, through February of 2024, their ticket delivery time is 5 minutes and 16 seconds. On slide 9, we will explain that. Ticket volume, ticket data year over year. Renewals, again for USA North, it's a little bit higher in 2024 through February Again, that will be explained a little bit more on slides 18 and 19. There aren't a whole lot of highlights. It's only been 2 months, and we've been dealing with some rain for both north and south. On slide 6, the homeowner ticket volume. DigAlert's homeowner ticket volume every month is right around 2%. Through 2023, it was, again, around 2%. It's not homeowner tickets is not a huge portion of our volume. On slide 9, USA North said that one of their ticket management systems that they don't have, but that owners of underground lines have, the operators have, Earth, had made some internal changes, and they blocked tickets coming from USA North, and it took 18 hours before it was resolved. That was the reason why their average through February was 5 minutes. It has since been resolved. Our online for both USA South, or for USA North and DigAlert, don't want to confuse people, our online continues to be the majority of our tickets. USA North is running about 85, 86%, and USA South is at 75%. So again, the majority of tickets are being done online. Not a whole lot. And then on slide 18 and 19 for USA North, at the beginning of 2023, USA North renewals were much lower after their cutover to Pelican because tickets were not migrated from their old system to their new system. And it seemed to be that many excavators didn't need to keep those tickets renewed, and so they just let them drop off. However, since August of 2023, renewals have started to back up to the historic levels that USA North has had of about 40,000 a month. And in your packets are electronic positive responses, what codes are being used, how many of each type. Again, knowing that the electronic positive responses are provided by the operators, we do have best practices for documentation as to when something should be used. But again, operators are the ones who choose which code it is they are going to use. And that's about it for the matrix that covers both. Happy to answer any questions for that, or I can go on to DigAlert's outreach and general updates.
Or do we have any questions? I have a question on slide 25. The no response by required time, my favorite code 999. I see 196,000 and some change versus 6,000. Is that an accurate account? That's a huge variance between the two entities.
I would have to double check that one.
Okay.
Member Vosser, I do like to note that on page 3 of our packet that the ACE ticket did increase a little bit in 23.
To answer your question, Madam Chair, the 6,000 that is on page 25 is not correct. It should be 29,000 plus 32,000, looking at page 27. Looks to be a typo.
Okay, thank you.
It will be corrected at the next meeting because it will be updated.
All right. I do see another question on the on time versus the late. It looks like there's a huge variance again. Well, I wouldn't say that huge, but it looks pretty big on page 31 for the two entities again. It's about what? A little less than like 15,000 or so. Differences in tickets on time and late. Is there a, I know in the past we've had some specific projects that may have been attributing or contributing to the lag. Is there something else that we should be hearing about, or is it just, they're just late?
I think they're just late.
Okay.
USA North has always had more on time. Part of that is because they have more tickets.
Ms. Diamond, I have a question on page 3 and page 4 on total ticket volumes. One being the increase in ticket volumes for January, February 2023 and 2024. Seemed like Dig Alert was kind of constant year over year, as in the north, it looks like it was about an increase of over 20,000 tickets. Is that caused by the rain or weather issues, or is the activity more in the north at this point, these 2 months?
I believe USA North has had more tickets in the first 2 months than Dig Alert has. Last year we had USA North was, I want to say 20% less volume than previous years, whereas Dig Alert was around 5% increase. So as I noted about the renewals have started to go back up, I believe that that's part of it.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any other additional questions? Okay, we can move on to your next portion of your presentation.
All right, just a couple of things for Dig Alert. This kind of goes back to the electronic positive response, the EPR. Starting in December, we started emailing at the first of the month, to our members that did not respond to 100% of their tickets that they received, that they did not respond to, that needed to have an electronic positive response, which is basically your new, your remarks and your return trip. Not that return trip tickets are a large volume. As noted, in December, which would be the ones we sent January 1st, 168 unique members were notified. In January, it was down to 136, and then in February, down to 119. So I'm thinking that that's helping to get more people to understand that they are supposed to be responding to electronic positive, to tickets through electronic positive response. I know I have said in the past that whenever there's a change, people don't like change, and two, it takes them a while to understand what their responsibilities are, no matter how many times we try and let them know. So I think we're trending in the right way. I know that staff has got a report a little bit later that kind of coincides with notifying Dig Alert members about their non-compliance with EPR. Also, I included a copy of our invitation to our quarterly underground safety awareness webinars. We wanted to start doing some in person this year, but finding venues is prohibitive. They're expensive. And when you offer something for free and you say you're going to have 150 people show up for something and only 75 do, and we've committed to 150, that are some costs that we want to try and take care of outside of just throwing away money. We are also this year trying to reach out to industry groups and training centers. In 2023, we found at our webinars, a lot of people, we were preaching to the choir. We asked, one of the questions we ask is this your first time? And we were getting more than half that were saying no, it wasn't their first time. So we were chalking that up to them wanting their $10 Home Depot or their $10 Starbucks card, or possibility of winning a Home Depot gift card. Amber is still going out and doing more in person now to individual companies. So we are still trying to do our best to get the word out. But again, we want to try and not preach to the choir and want to get to those that are not calling us in the first place. And then finally, just a general update. On February 25th, we had an employee and family night at the Ducks game. There's a picture of everybody who was there on the ice next to our in-ice Dig Alert logo. It was a great time had by all, although my granddaughter was upset that the Ducks did not win. And that's all that I have. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, sorry. Ms. Diamond, I just had a question on your, I appreciate the efforts for your outreach program. Just had a question regarding the time frame of the email that you sent out to the non-responding company. What was the time frame from the time the ticket was closed out? Is a month later, 2 months later, or right after?
It's a month later. So if they were supposed to have responded in December, on January 1st is when, and they didn't respond by basically anybody who got a 999 in the month of December on January 1st would get the notice that they needed to do that.
And so did they respond back to the emails or?
A lot of them, yes, have contacted our member services to find out how can we comply with this. Some of them have updated shape files because they were getting tickets in areas that they didn't have any concern about. Looking into it, they ended up having never updated their shape files since we switched over in 2017 from Thomas Guide to polygons.
Is there any thought given to possibility of those notifications going out after maybe 2-3 days and say, hey, you didn't respond to this notification, you need to make sure you do it in the future, or
that's something we can look at doing. This was just kind of a first step.
Yeah, I think the more you do that and kind of notify them, I think they'll get the message really quickly. So, but I like the effort, so thank you.
Any other board comments or questions? All right, thank you, Ms. Diamond. Mr. Wingate, I think it's you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thank you. Happy to talk about updates for USA North 811. Our Q1 is typically the busiest time of the year for us for our marketing and education department. They're busy all year round as we want them to be, but we have some big events in Q1 that are especially noteworthy. I do want to start by letting you know we did add another person to our member service or to our marketing and education team, Nathan Oliver, whose picture is here. We now have 2 people who go out and do the presentations for excavators. You may recall that in previous meetings I mentioned that we have had more requests than we could accommodate. We do want to, a lot of our outreaches, we're hoping people are going to see a billboard or hear a radio ad or see a bill stuffer that a utility operator sent or something like that. So when we get a request from somebody who purposefully asks, will you come and give us a presentation, we love those. But unfortunately, we can't be in 2 places at the same time if we only have one person doing those. And sometimes the requests are of the variety of, hey, can you be here at 6 a.m. to give a presentation to my crew before they go hit the field? And so that's always great if we can do it. And we were able to add another staff member to that department this year. We are thankful to our board of directors to authorize funds for that. Nathan Oliver started on the phone, as did all of our employees. Every single one of our employees started on the phones, and so we like that background. If we can go to the next slide, Ms. Riggle. Here are some of the presentations we've done so far, just a few photos from Chris Botting, our other education coordinator, who has been, Nate's been learning from Chris about how that goes. This is one we did in the left is a picture in Sacramento, and we've been doing them throughout the state, but we've really tried to target counties that have had high damages. So Sacramento County, Fresno County have been especially on our radar this year. You may recall last year I mentioned that, we've always done advertising for the Bay Area and also for Las Vegas, our 2 largest population centers, but people in Fresno do not consider themselves part of the Bay Area, same with Sacramento. And so we wanted to do some micro campaigns for that, and you'll see some additional slides about that coming up here in a minute. If we can go to the next slide. These are just some additional ones where we went to Browning Contractors, Paradise Irrigation District. Sometimes the groups are small, intimate. You can ask lots of questions, but we try to accommodate, especially when they make the request from us. On the next slide, This is our biggest event of the year for the marketing and education team, which is the World Ag Expo. It takes place in Tulare County each year. For those listening online or others who may not be familiar with this, this is the largest agricultural trade show in the world, has over 100,000 attendees, and these are people who are literally in the dirt. This is our exact prime audience who we want, people who will be digging, as opposed to, say, people at a baseball game who may or may not be digging. We know these guys are going to be digging, so this is a great opportunity. We did something new this year. When there are hundreds of vendors and we're trying to compete for people to come to our booth, we try to be a little creative to get them to come over. We don't have a gigantic combine or some fancy equipment that we're selling, and so we're trying to get people to come over. So this year we got a prize wheel, which is 7 feet tall, and when it's on its stand, it's over 8 feet tall. And the goal with that is it's kind of like a combination of The Price is Right versus Wheel of Fortune, where you spin and answer some questions about, say, digging and win a prize. We did have our air cannon cornhole, which was a big hit. You'll see on the next page, or the next slide, you'll see some other pictures. One thing we did was there are other utility operators that participate at the Ag Show as well, PG&E, SoCal Gas, and SoCal Edison. So we decided to do a partnership with them, and we called it the 811 Passport, where if they visited all the booths from all three of those, then they would get a stamp that would put them in the raffle for a drawing. And you can see on the bottom right of that slide right there, on day one, we had 948 people visit all three of those, or at least get them stamped. Hopefully we had more than that, 802, 784 for a total of over 2,500 for those 3 days of the show. So that was what they had to do to get a spin for a prize. You saw on the previous slide those green foam hats. For some reason, the young people really like those green foam hats, and so we gave away a lot of them, and they're not cheap. But when they're walking around the show, everybody sees them, and it's worth it from an advertising perspective, because we didn't have 100,000 people at our booth. But I guarantee 100,000 people saw that green hat with 811 on it, so that was good. On the next slide, these are just some pictures. We had local news media there interviewing us. That's Colin on slide 54 on the bottom left. In the middle, that's our marketing and education director answering questions. And then you can see kind of the long line on the top left. That's actually one of the shorter. Sometimes they had over 100 people in line, and so that's a good thing if we can get people who want to stay. But that's our setup, where you can see we have all those pop-ups, and while they're waiting in line is when we bombard them with education and try to get them to learn something new and not just come and shoot the cornhole air cannon. On the next slide, just logistically though, the Ag Show is so big. We sent 6 people down there, and they had to call on the first day for reinforcements because the booth was just overwhelmed. Even with 6 people, they couldn't handle all the traffic. This is a good problem to have. So we sent 2 more down the next day, and with 8 people, they were swamped, and they came back tired. And because you're outside, literally in the dirt for this event, and so everyone in the field, of course, is used to this. So it's probably harder for us softies in the office to spend days in the dirt educating, but it was good. So this is a good problem to have. But logistically, we probably spend upwards of $20,000 in terms of renting the booth space and all the stuff that goes with it, and the travel and hauling all that down and everything. It really is an expensive event for us. But again, 100,000 people who are all actual excavators, or will be. Many of these are high school kids who are learning the trades, and so this is, again, prime audience. So we believe it to be worth it for us, especially since that recent partnership that we did with the PG&E, SoCal Gas, and SoCal Edison, we thought was very effective. We did participate in a national campaign. Arizona 811 took the lead on this, but this is a NASCAR series, and we were actually the title, we meaning the 811 industry, were the title sponsors of a race. It had the brief name of the call811.com every dig, every time 200 race. And even the commentators were joking about that being the longest name ever for a race, but it is what it is. So that one was in Phoenix, but there are about 30 other races throughout the country, including in Las Vegas and Sonoma in our area, where the race cars with Call 811 will be featured, and the driver will be around to answer questions and so forth. So that's a big campaign. Arizona 811 takes the lead on that since the title race was in Phoenix, but we were able to help and send one of our guys down to do some filming and help man the booth there to answer lots of questions. On the next slide, this was, we've started a new campaign. We've been attempting to target Latino excavators. We know that the Latino community is overrepresented in construction, and so we wanted to have more Spanish outreach, but also just venues and events that they are interested in. And soccer, or football as they say, of course, is very popular. And so we started a campaign with the San Jose Earthquakes. They have the highest attendance of any minor league baseball team in the nation. And the crowd is, we've been very pleased with the reception from when we do a booth prior to each home game. At some other ones we've done, such as with the Oakland A's, sometimes before the game, they'll usually open the gates about 2 hours before, and people kind of slowly trickle in, and then there's a big push right before the first pitch. With this one, as soon as the gates opened 2 hours before, we were swamped immediately. There were hundreds of people, if not thousands, waiting right when the gates opened. And so there's a big atmosphere of tailgating, and the booth is actually, instead of outside the stadium, it's on a part of that's surrounded inside. And so, or it's on the grass, it's outside of the stands, but it's closer, gives more of the experience is tied to the game and not just to the parking lot, if that makes sense. So we've been very pleased with that. Had to arrange our staffing to accommodate all the home games, which are on Saturdays. But that's been good. And again, we get part of that campaign includes announcements from over the PA and lights around the stadium in English and Spanish, both encouraging Call Before You Dig. Okay, on the next slide, the other micro campaign that I mentioned is for Sacramento. We're working with the soccer team there, which is called the Sacramento Republic. And you can see in the example, there's one of the banners, digital banners surrounding on the perimeter of the stadium going around, reminding about the Call Before You Dig. That's part of that. And it's also broadcast on the local Fox station. Part of that included the pregame guide on their website that has the logo in kind of a different font, like it's flapping in the wind. That's what's happening there, in case your eyes are playing tricks on you. Those letters are blowing in the wind there. On the next slide, we've done some other, this is a conference with landscapers. Some of these, this particular picture is from Nevada, but just another event that we've done. This one was with Southwest Gas, was our partner on that one. And on the next slide, a summary of some of the outreach in Nevada. They still are very active with their regional Common Ground Alliance. You can see 410 attendees in person with 28 separate presentations. Those happen in both English and Spanish in person. And then the bottom right, and then the last slide there just gives a summary of all the events and that we've done so far. So you can see a big start of the year for us from the M&E side. And that's the extent of my update this time. It's all on the education side. I don't have any technology updates for you since our last meeting in January. As you can see, we've been swamped doing the M&E stuff for the last few months. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Wingate.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, so we will proceed if there are any public comments. Rain, are there any webinar comments?
At present, there are no webinar comments.
All right, we'll give the board one last chance. Any final comments on any of the presentations? There was 3 of them. All right, thank you, Ms. Diamond, Mr. Wingate, for your presentations. They were awesome. All right, the next item is an information item on the PIPES Act of 2023. Staff will provide a high-level overview of proposed amendments to federal pipeline safety laws related to the board's interests. Mr. Marino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in November 2023, a bill was introduced in Congress called the PIPES Act of 2023. This is a bill that it has not passed Congress. It may be amended, and it's part of the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration reauthorization. We wanted to highlight several aspects of it. So the PIPES Act has to do with pipeline safety laws, which do not always are not always related to the work that we do, but often there are some parts that do affect us, and so wanted to highlight those. The first is a proposal for a voluntary information sharing / reporting program. This is similar to the FAA's confidential aviation reporting system, where employees are able to go to a neutral third party to report safety issues that they've identified. That neutral third party, takes that information, anonymizes it, and presents it to essentially the industry so that they can make safety decisions. The purpose is to address potential concerns within an organization that sometimes safety issues don't always get risen through the chain of command. This is something that, the FAA's reporting system is something we discussed in, I think it was the end of 2020 or 2018, as a way that one can do this. I know the Federal Railroad Administration did this as a pilot for railroads. The Public Utilities Commission several years ago was discussing this kind of approach. It's ends up being somewhat complicated because you need people to report to provide value, and people don't always see this see it as like an appropriate or useful way to report safety issues. It did take the FAA at least a decade to really get it up and running. But in general, it seems like a positive direction in looking at safety issues. Also, the bill proposes to add carbon dioxide pipelines to those that are federally regulated, alongside natural gas and hazardous liquid pipelines. How this affects our work is that those carbon dioxide pipeline operators would also need to fulfill the public education requirements of federal law and regulations. Those are both to people to know what to do when there's a leak, for instance, and then also excavation. A third element that we found interesting had to do with incorporating standards by reference. The pipeline industry has a lot of industry standards that are incorporated into federal regulations by reference. There are a lot of operations and maintenance requirements that require specific construction standards, how to do welds, testing requirements, how to determine whether a maximum operating pressure and what sorts of materials are suitable for managing those pipeline stresses. So there are a lot of standards incorporated by reference in federal regulations. What has been done over the past several years is PHMSA has used the requirements related to passing a regulation, the rulemaking requirements, to essentially say, hey, we want you to, different standards organizations, we want you to make your standards available to the public, because how can we pass a regulation if we can't tell the public what that regulation says, essentially. This would further those efforts in making these standards public, including having the Government Accountability Office review the compliance of different standard-setting organizations in making these standards that are incorporated, making them public. Also, there are a couple changes related to the grants that are provided to states for excavation safety. While these grants aren't huge, they have in the past provisions in these federal laws have affected PHMSA's approach and the pipeline industry's approach to excavation safety. The 9 elements of pipeline safety were incorporated, I think it was 2006, which are often still quoted and used as ways to improve a state's pipeline safety program. There are a couple more that are proposed in this bill, including what constitutes leading practices for a state. This includes the state as a whole and the one-call centers within it. You will notice of the 14 points, many of them we either already have in law, some of them we haven't, but pretty much everything's been discussed. So I think it's interesting just to see this happen at the federal level, that all the things that we're discussing are being discussed elsewhere, and they're all still relevant problems that we want to solve. And then lastly, there's another proposal in a different grant section that's proposing what constitutes effectiveness in a damage prevention program. I'll just point out that there are some reporting requirements that are included in determining effectiveness that are proposed. So it's something to consider that if these or any of the other changes are made to the pipeline safety laws, that the board may wish to consider incorporating them into its legislative framework at that time. That is all. Just wanted to give an update on what's going on at the federal level. Happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Marino. We'll move on to public comments, and webinar will be on deck. Are there any public comments at this time? Rain, are there any webinar comments?
There are no webinar comments at this time.
All right, so we'll move to the board. Board, who would like to start the discussion or ask any questions to Mr. Marino? All right, well, thank you for your presentation. We'll move on to item number 7. It's an informational item on the 2023 results report. Mr. Marino, back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to present the 2023 results report, and we certainly will not go through everything in the report. It contains a lot of the work you're familiar with since you were doing it last year. Especially, you'll be familiar with all the policy elements and the enforcement actions. The report also contains other activities that I've referred to in the executive officer's report, but haven't really gone into. These include efforts to enhance technology, items that were not sufficiently developed in 2023 to really go into at board meetings, though I think you'll see that a few of them are in the agenda today to be discussed, as well as a No 811 complaint pilot program that we thought we wanted to provide you a bit more of an update on. And for that, I'll turn to our Assistant Executive Officer, Brittany Brannaman.
Thank you, Mr. Marino. So as we're all aware, excavating without a ticket is a problem in California. These excavations often result in damages to buried utilities. So to address these issues, staff began developing an elective reporting process for operators to provide us with more detailed information about damages to their utilities without an 811 ticket. In order to collect this information, staff utilized an Esri environment product called Survey 123 to allow utility operators to collect information from the field and provide it directly to board investigators. This survey product developed questions and designed in concert with SoCalGas. The goal of this collaboration was to understand what information they are able to collect in the field and that we would need as board investigators to act quickly and swiftly to complete the investigation. The results of this pilot program have been that SoCalGas provided us 55 notifications. Out of those 55, we were able to quickly open up 20 investigations and assign them to investigators, and 2 have already gone in front of the board at the November board meeting. Since that first go around, we've learned a lot. We've partnered with SoCalGas several times over the last few months to understand their challenges and pain points in collecting information in the field, and then our challenges in receiving that information to be able to act quickly. One of the biggest challenges is no contact information for excavators. So when we get that complaint, we often spend a lot of time trying to figure out who to reach out to at the excavation company to confirm information that we've received. So since then, staff has developed a new survey which consists of 41 questions. It's more detailed on the utility operator's end, but we believe that providing us that information will really cut down on board investigative time and we'll be able to handle a larger volume of excavations without an 811 ticket. We're developing that new survey with the Esri product, and we're hoping to release it out to SoCalGas and other operators to beta test that later on this month. We're going to continue beta testing for 3 more months, and then we will come back to the table, discuss any pain points or challenges, see how we need to adjust, and then we are hopeful that we can roll that out statewide later on this year. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
And that's, again, there's plenty in this results report, and happy to answer questions on any of it, but we'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you for your report. We will go to public comments with the webinar on deck. Are there any public comments? Rain, are there any webinar comments?
There are no webinar comments at this time.
All right, board, who would like to start the discussion? I do want to point out, if anybody has the packet with them, that the board members, it's a very lovely picture of all of us, but we're short members now. So we lost member Bianchini and member Del Toro. And there will be a couple more term outs coming at the end of this year. So there's a spot for you should you decide this is your calling. You're very passionate about having non-emergency tickets declared as tickets perhaps, or abandoned lines, or there's a plethora of topics that we've talked about passionately over the years. Member Charlin just told me it's been about 8 years already for him.
Well, not counting 2017, but yeah, it'll be 8 years at the end of this.
So we've all been up there for a while. So it's time for new blood to get on the board. So if those of you in person are interested, or if any of the 25 participants online are interested, there are operators standing by for your application. So it would be really nice to really focus in on what concerns you and the people that you represent. You do represent the people of California. How awesome is that, right? So the results report is extremely awesome, but we do need more members. Without more board members, we don't have that fresh face of California always up front. Okay, so are there any other board comments besides my commercial on why to join this awesome representation of subsurface installation?
Member Foster, I'd like to thank staff for putting this report together. I enjoyed going through it, and really the reflection on just how much is going on all at one time. And although things are always in progress, and it seems like we've got a ways to go, it does memorialize what we have accomplished, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
There's one other packet if you have picked up all the papers. There's the underground safety board stuff. If you pick up that flyer or that sheet, it shows you how many gaps there are. So again, if you'd like to fulfill one of these gaps here, that'd be very helpful. But if you consider for a second that all of this work was done, and it's a huge packet, this was done by a very tiny team. And it's something to be really proud of and grateful for, because this is a board that focuses on safety of everyone, right? The public, excavators, day workers, people that are foremen, doesn't matter. We focus on everybody. So these, all these names here put in countless hours. So thank you so much. And the results are here, and it's really nice to finally have the results report to share with the public. So, everywhere you go, you can grab extra and just hand them out. Say like, hey guys, I went to this meeting and here's what this board has accomplished. You can just hand them out, put them in as gifts, right? Little gift baskets, maybe raffle them off at work. Seems like those are exciting raffles. So, okay, so I'll stop my commercial, but I just wanted to thank everybody that's been involved in putting this report together.
Member Johns, I'll add to your commercial or your infomercial here. Just the fact that we are addressing things that the industry is facing across the country. We are California doing parallel work that's being done all over, but I got to say that this is a group that can implement ideas and put them to the forefront of the whole industry. We're talking in this in our result reports, we've addressed issues on marked abandoned lines, potholing, design issues, improving the ticketing process and things. We are in the cutting edge of this industry, and it's important what we're doing. And I think, looking forward to continuing. And it's good that our group got things kind of kicked off and started, and going through COVID and things like that. But we do have a machine that's starting to work, I think. So, and appreciate the staff of what you're doing, and looking forward to moving forward.
All right, there's no more additional comments. We'll move on to item number 8, which is board committees. Staff will present on current board committee assignments and board discussions. Mr. Marino, would you please proceed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will actually keep you on the results report and turn your attention to page 4, which does identify the board's committees. Given that the board has 2 fewer members than it did in January, we thought it was time to talk about committees and the committee workload. We suggest that you might want to make some changes to consolidate some committees at your next meeting, but thought it was appropriate to start that discussion today. You might wish to look at the potholing and planning and design committees, and whether once the potholing initial work of the standards that went out last year. Once those are pretty solid, it might be good to transfer that over to the Planning and Design Committee, given that there's quite a nexus between the two. As you can see also in the results report, a lot of agriculture was really education outreach. And so it might make sense to combine the Agriculture Committee with the Education Committee and perhaps create an Education Outreach Committee. There are a couple of committees that might need, instead of consolidation, members filling in. Certainly the Ticket Process Committee is one that has a significant workload with electronic positive response, ticket volatility, et cetera, and that workload is going to continue for quite a while. And so it might be appropriate to give member Charlene some support in that committee. Additionally, we have a legislative committee with one member. It is, we can see by the time we get to the next meeting whether it's appropriate to add somebody to that committee or if perhaps some of that work has already been wrapped up. The legislative session is in full swing, and so the bill that the committee was created to address, SB 778, is likely to be heard in June or July. So by that time, you'll have a sense of what you want to do with that committee. We also identify in a staff report further on in the agenda that for membership termination, that might require some support from a committee. And so we'll consider that as well. And maybe you can determine that at the next meeting. But those are, our initial thoughts, and wanted to just turn it over to you to get your thoughts before we decide how to act in July.
All right, thank you. And we're going to go ahead and turn it over to the public, both in person and on the webinar. See if you guys are going to run up here and demand the application really quick. We have, like I said, we have operators standing by. So please step up to the podium to make any comments.
Hi, this is Steve Klieger with PG&E again. Just a comment on the committee meeting or committee membership. Knowing that we have shrunk down with the board size so much, this is not me necessarily volunteering, but I do think that the stakeholders that you have here on a regular basis would be willing to continue to support the board to keep things moving along. As the board shrinks down, we know that it's going to be more and more challenging for you guys to make progress on certain things. So just saying that if there is an opportunity, not sure exactly what the structure looks like, for some of your most frequent flyer stakeholders that attend these meetings to assist in that. This is an area that I think that we need to see continued progress on, and the only way that you're going to get that support is likely from folks that have been a part of this process for the last several years. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? All right, Rain, any webinar comments?
There are no webinar comments at this time.
Okay, let's proceed with board comments. Who'd like to start the discussion?
A member of officer, I would be more than happy to work with Member Johnson.
Member Johnson here. I would love that, Carl. This is a lot, and we're already moving at a snail's pace. So, I'm looking at ways that we can kind of expedite some of these things and get them moved on and get some progress made. I don't know how you do it because it's a lot, but we have to probably prioritize what has to be done and focus on those things and then go through the list. But agriculture with education, and with Mr. Member Voss's help, that would be greatly appreciated. I don't know what Member Johns thinks about moving potholing into planning and design, but it could be, because not always, potholing it has to do with planning. In some cases it does, but not all the time.
Yeah, Member Johns, definitely. I mean, potholing is a major portion of the planning and design process and leading into construction. So, yeah, if we did that, I think it makes sense. But it is a major subject on its own too. I mean, there's so much to, just the issues and get into the design issues and versus construction. Some of the things we were discussing earlier about just white lining and things like that, limits and stuff. So it's a good fit, I think, to tie them together. If we, lacking others, go into the details, we can look at a big picture of it.
I think I would propose that we put together education, agriculture, and safety lessons all as one. I don't know if that's a lot, but it sounds, the safety lessons are pretty much educational for the most part, right? So unless there was some other sketch of how those might look, maybe the GIS and the unmarked abandoned lines would be a nice way to match them together. It is unfortunate that we don't have that many people, because it looks like you're proposing another subcommittee for membership termination. And I think with Member Johnson's comments about prioritization, it seems like the ticket process is one of the areas that is highest priority. But then there's the legislative that's coming up. So those two are probably the closest. And the only area that I would disagree, which is very strange now, considering all these years, and I would say we go really fast for government in this, on this board, which is shocking. We're very quick. We're like lightning snails, right? So, what do you think? Is safety lessons too much to consolidate, or does that make sense?
I don't think it's that much to put in within that group, because we learn from the other items, and so we can always, and pretty much the educational outreach incorporates safety anyway. So I don't think it's a big deal. My only concern is with the ticket processing part of it.
Yeah.
Because pretty much I think we're looking at dictating to the one call centers and to the rest of the world what we expect some kind of consistency to be, which I think is kind of an urgent request by them, and what they really need is direction from us, or they're looking for direction from us, and we need to hurry up and give it to them so that they can move forward and do what they need to do from a technological perspective and an outreach perspective. So
I think if we're prioritizing, it'd be ticket process, legislative, and then we can work on the planning design, because those kind of go hand in hand. It sounds like membership termination has some priority. So those are like 3 right there, and then we have 3 additional, which would be the education, and then GIS. I guess that's it. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a lot. We don't have that many people, so.
Madam Chair, I think the member termination gets us into a legislative issue, and I think it probably needs to be put in with that. I'm not sure, but.
Is that what you guys were thinking?
We don't currently see it as necessarily a legislative issue, certainly a regulatory issue.
Right.
Upon further, consultation with our attorneys, we might come to a different conclusion about all of it, depending on exactly where you go. But it's definitely, we see it more as a regulatory issue at the moment.
Yeah, I'd agree, regulatory. But it still may require some legislation to go with it, right? Eventually, maybe.
I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
So it seems like we have 6 committees if we consolidate the way that we're thinking. And what is there, 5 of us? So again, operators are standing by for those of you who would like to serve the people of California. And I think we kind of went over that a lot, but is there any more board comments on this topic?
Doesn't it require two board members to be
It does.
on each committee?
I mean, it requires no more than 2. So you could have a 1-member committee, which you do for some of these committees right now.
Member Charlene, so I think the ticket process committee, even though I'm the lone survivor member, I don't mind handling that by myself. I actually think that the membership one actually weaves in really good into this one. I'd like to have help. If I had a choice, I'd actually want Marshall because he could hit the ground running. But I don't know how the outside of what was just mentioned as the public comment, if that's an option that, there's a group of people that are going to come on and be active when we have some public committee meetings, that will be very valuable. And then the one-call centers in this topic also will be a big help when we're discussing that.
I know early on we did workshop format when we were working on writing 4216. Is that was very labor intensive. We met every month almost. Is that something that would be doable if we went back to a workshop format and then invited more public?
I think throughout, our history, we've been trying to determine what's the best way to bring in the public. We don't tend to have a problem of opportunities or access. It's more of a how are we generating interest. So I think for every element of this, and we've seen it certainly with the standards, and we'll continue to, that bringing the public in and trying to get as much feedback is going to be important. So I think every committee should be thinking about the best way to incorporate public, be it those who are particularly interested, who will come no matter what, or those that we need to put special effort into. So the committees are really kind of an Open Meeting Act type entity. And so they exist, specifically for, multi-member bodies like this one to operate without having an in-person public meeting. So I think the committees really just have to be identified with board members and no more than 2. But that doesn't mean that they can't be incorporating public feedback in intense and creative manner.
So, Madam Chair, I think what we're looking at then is safety, agriculture, and education outreach being 1, GIS being 2, potholing, planning, and design 3, and then ticket processing and member termination 4. And then you have, I don't know what to do with the legislative and unmarked abandoned lines. I don't know. Do we have an option on those 2?
I think legislation should stay by itself and...
Okay, that'll be 5.
Yeah.
And we still need to do something with unmarked and abandoned lines.
I would think the abandoned lines could roll into GIS. Because it's a standard, maybe we focus on standards of assets, be it GIS or abandoned lines.
one thing to think about is originally we had a standards committee. And that was with members Bianchini and Munoz. And we then determined that each of these standards are really big unto themselves and should require a committee when they are being worked up. And so we've had one example with the potholing standards. Now that they're public, a draft is public, and we're working on incorporating the public feedback from 2 workshops last August into those. It seems to be at a place where, okay, since all this the committee has done the work and now it's public, maybe that gets wrapped up into planning and design. So we might want to consider the Unmarked and Abandoned Lines committee in a similar fashion, that ultimately, once it, comes up with its standards product, then, and makes it public, then that gets wrapped up again into a standards committee, like the potholing planning and design is being considered right now.
I'm not sure I understand that one, Tony.
I guess I'm just suggesting a longer timetable for wrapping up the Unmarked and Abandoned Lines committee into another committee. We're thinking from the staff perspective, it might be an early 2025 when we're at the position with that committee that we are with potholing. And so it might be at that time where it's good to consider wrapping it into another committee or consolidating. I'm not sure that we're ready to consolidate it now.
Well, what about the possibility of moving Abandoned Lines by itself over to GIS? And then...
Are we ready to start working on GIS yet? I don't think we've done much with that, but if we just kind of...
So I think first we need to deal with the unmarked lines question, and then that kind of leads into the abandoned lines. That's the way we've been thinking. And at the end of abandoned lines and GIS, there is a clear nexus. I think everyone can see forward to something there. But I do think that where we are in the GIS is not coincident with the unmarked lines, where we are on the unmarked and abandoned lines. So I don't think we're at the point where they're really the same thing. And so here's what I'm not sure, and why I'm a little hesitant to say that those two can be wrapped up into the same one. I do think that we do want a lot of these to be wrapped up into a standards, as a standards document. We're thinking right now that the GIS committee will have regulations, which were pretty much what was asked for by CARGA in their idea register submission, but we'll probably also have standards, right? And I don't know which is going to come first, the standards from GIS or the standards from unmarked and abandoned lines. And I don't know. I don't know what consolidation should happen first.
Yeah, but my concern, just like was brought up earlier, is with the GIS and standards. Because if we don't get on that and clarify that right away, then we're going to have a big hill to climb to fix it after the fact. So.
Is it clear as mud now?
Since the board isn't taking action today, maybe this is something we can take back and consider with both of the committees. One person is on both, and so should be familiar with it, and see where we are in July in terms of what we're ready with, and give you a better idea of the roadmap. So we can determine how to handle that. I think probably ultimately when we're thinking about committee workload, that means Member Munoz is going to stay with, those both committees, but who is no longer going to be on one of those committees if they, consolidate.
Mm-hmm.
And don't anyone volunteer to not be on it yet.
I think we just need to keep everyone where they are. But if you'd like to take additional duties, no problem.
Well, Member Voss here, what I'm hearing is in cases of unmarked and abandoned lines and the GIS, even potholing, plan and design, by keeping them separate, we keep their focus where they need to be until we get farther down the line. It's just a matter of us doubling up on our duties, so to speak.
And I think we are at a point on the staff level. If you look at the staff sheet on the policy division, we have everyone filled in their position. And so while it may be more work for you, we're finally in a position to start doing all of these.
Yeah, Member Johns, just from what I hear, seems like if we can in July identify a good where we're at with these committees, what are our goals, moving forward, and just a quick brief summary of where we're at. Because I think as a board, we're on committees, but we really don't know what the other committees are doing, what you've been on. So if we can kind of regroup this as a agenda item and then, see where we're at, and then probably be better off to discuss it and move forward at that time.
Okay, it sounds like we're done with this discussion. It's 2:35. Should we take a 15-minute break? Is everybody good with that? We'll take a small 15-minute break, and we'll be back at, 2:50? Yeah. And then we'll start with item 9, which is the 811 Notification Center membership termination process, which we've kind of danced around. So let's take a short meeting, and we'll take a timeout on the webinar for a second, and we'll come back in 15 minutes. Back, everyone, from our little bit longer than it should have been break, but it was this place is so nice, such a lovely venue that everyone had to get their eyes full of how beautiful it is here. So if you're not
being recorded, only the main conference is recorded.
So if you're not here in person today, I highly encourage the next meeting. Perhaps you can swing by. Where is it going to be? Sacramento next time? Sacramento is quite lovely. There's a beautiful atrium, so hopefully you can swing by. So we'll return to item number 9, which is the information item on 811 Notification Center membership termination process. So staff will present information on the membership processes. Ms. Bonner, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In June 2021, the board received an IDEA register submission from the 811 notification centers with a safety concern that facility operators that become a member not in good standing due to non-payment for regional notification invoices or quit memberships. The notification centers recommended they should notify the board of any members who canceled their membership or whose memberships were terminated due to non-payment, and the board should consider following up with those members. In reviewing the 811 Notification Center bylaws, the bylaws addressing transfer were nearly identical. However, the USA North and Dig Alert bylaws regarding membership termination were considerably different. Staff reviewed several different termination requests, which demonstrated the lack of clarity for all parties regarding whether the members are meeting their legal obligations as an operator. For one request, the entity terminating its membership was on contract to operate and maintain the streetlights for a city. The city had changed contractors to a division of the county who was under contract with approximately 20 other cities for similar work and performed all work under one single member code. In another request, a contractor was installing new communication facilities and had been a member of the 811 notification center for the duration of the construction. Once the work was completed, the contractor transferred the facilities to the communications company. This resulted in confusion over who should pay the fees. In another request, when a petroleum exploration company received a letter from the board staff notifying them that they had not provided sufficient electronic positive response, the company stated that they were no longer a member of the 811 notification center and provided a letter it had sent to the 811 notification center to terminate its membership, as it was no longer responsible for the underground facilities and they did not own any of the underground facilities. The company did not indicate that someone else was responsible or made any indication that the facilities had been removed from the ground. Each of these cases led to additional questions surrounding the circumstances of the termination request, such as who the operator was, whether the facilities were still in the ground, if the shape files were updated with the 811 notification centers and transferred to the new owner, and if the new owner was a member of the 811 notification center to receive dig tickets to respond to the excavator on where those buried facilities were located. Staff recommends that the board direct staff to work with the 811 notification centers to develop potential answers to questions regarding the 811 notification centers centers being provided with sufficient information to ensure excavators are being notified of the presence of subsurface installations, and if current termination processes are sufficient to ensure operator compliance with 811 notification center membership requirements and protect the safety of excavators, and what role the 811 notification centers and the board play in member termination. Staff believes that a board committee may be necessary in the future to review potential solutions, but is not recommending one at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bonner. All right, we'll open it up for the public. Any public comments? Any webinar comments?
There are no webinar comments at this time.
Okay. I'll turn it over to the board. It sounds like we kind of got a better alignment of what the membership committee could be about. Sounds more like a precursor to prevent abandoned lines, right? So, I mean, more details, but what do you guys think? So you're not recommending we have a committee yet, but it sounds like it's pretty critical if we want to stop abandoned lines from increasing.
Member Johnson, I think it's more serious than just somebody not being a member of the one call center or not being able to identify who owns those facilities. So it's a major safety concern and issue. And then you have the financial burden that's been placed on the one call center, and then the extra burden on the excavator from a safety perspective. I do believe it needs to be involved in a committee, but it has to be taken a lot more serious than just them not paying a bill or them not being a member. Because I think the law says that if you own facilities, you have to be a member of the one call center. And it's not a matter of the one call center saying, hey, you don't pay, you know, we refer you over to the safety board. It's a matter of you don't pay, well, you're going to have to do something. And so I think we have to prioritize this one at the higher of the list. So that's my concern.
So if we do look at it as as a higher priority and kind of a precursor to prevent abandoned lines. And there is the safety aspect that we've talked about. That would fall under Johns and Munoz. What do you think, Member Johns?
Well, I think there's not too many mechanisms to identify who has facilities underground. One of them is, in fact, if you have a facility, if you're a member of the 811 and you're responsible for maintaining it. I think, we need to have some way to, when the time comes for somebody that's going to be digging, that somebody has to be able to tell them that there's something there. So there's some way we need to keep the accounting straight that they recognize it and or get it off the books in some other way. But yeah, it needs to be looked at, and I think the idea of moving forward with is the way to go. And they're not necessarily abandoned either. I mean, they're
not yet.
Yeah, so it's not an abandoned line issue. But it sets a precedence for, or possibly for, other issues. So I would say we need to look at it closer.
So saying that we have the whole policy team intact, and me trying to say that it's connected to abandoned lines, so we automatically have a membership of 2, that'd be you and I guess, Ms. Bonner, would this be something that the team could take on, seeing that you have a full roster? I think it's the only team with the full roster, is it? No, there's 3 teams with the full roster. Is that something, I know it's not recommended this time, but it sounds like it's pretty important if I can get Member Johns over here to agree that if we're going to prioritize it, that we'll just take it. Should we just take it then?
You can't take action today because we didn't have the action, but we wanted to touch base and get clarification from the 811 notification centers, bring those responses back to the board, and then at that point, the board can take action.
So in July?
Yes.
Okay, so we don't forget. Just keep it in your mind, everybody and everybody.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I want to go back to earlier discussion.
Yep.
Where Member Charlene had talked about maybe putting that with ticket processing.
Well, it is the exit of being in the ticket processing system, right?
Right.
Either way, it's fine. If we, just so we're ready for July, so we hit it hard. But if you guys could get, you have your full staff, so we're ready for July?
Yes, we can make the request with the 811 notification centers and then present back in July.
Okay.
And then maybe we'll have a better idea of the interaction between ticket process committee and the membership termination or application processes, and then also the abandoned lines committee and the specific instance of somebody saying we don't operate lines anymore when they're really considering them abandoned. So we might be able to tease out those two a little bit better at that time.
Is it possible for next meeting, I mean, we don't see the enforcement yet, but for us to consider like a partial workshop on the end of the 2-day? If we have an action, let's say on Monday, and then Tuesday, half the day, we have a workshop, would that work out?
I don't know that we know what we would workshop quite yet. It might be good to start talking about what are the responsibilities of operators who have abandoned lines, who go through an abandonment process. Certainly, there's for natural gas and hazardous liquid pipelines, abandonment processes, and abandonment is well defined. And so that might be a good place to look at whether or not your locate and mark and other responsibilities end when you go through that process, or if they don't. So maybe we could have more of a discussion on that, which I think will loop into the termination discussion.
Member Charlene. The recommendation from the staff is to, the board's going to work with the 811 staff and kind of come up with the questions and some answers. And they also have the TCC committees at both one call centers. I do see an advantage of letting that happen, and them to kind of search for these questions and get the answers, and it'd be a more productive meeting, I think. You know, because we need to have those two boards consistent. It sounds like, you know, it needs some help there.
Member Voss, I mean, it's pretty clear by the examples that was expressed here that it's not about an abandoned line issue. It's just about whatever the line is, someone doesn't want to be a member anymore, but understanding why they don't want to be and tying it to somebody who's going to take over that responsibility. I know in our industry, in the air district up in the valley, we have issues similar to that where we have a conservation management plan, but we can't just walk away from it. We have to say, okay, we're not farming this piece of ground. They want to know, well, who's taking over, you know, so we can prevent a dust problem or whatever comes out of that. So I think it's a similar process. But to your example, Madam Chair, there are probably instances where there are abandoned lines too. So I think the recommendation by staff to do more investigating is appropriate.
All right, so are there any other discussions? Otherwise, we will move on to 10, given the accepting the staff's recommendations. All right, item 10 is the emergency excavation notification exemption. So the next item is an information item on emergency evacuation or excavation A11 notification exemptions. The staff will present a report on the emergency excavation A11 notification exemption. So, Mr. Marino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So emergency notifications have been discussed by this board at several meetings and often in conjunction with enforcement items. In particular, there's been discussion about whether there should have been 811 notification in certain emergency situations, even if that notification is currently not required by law. And so we'd like you to discuss whether, you know, the should is can be sufficiently articulated and developed to be a potential recommendation to the governor and legislature for a proposed statutory change. In this report, we discuss the elements of the exemption. So first is that the excavator under an emergency can dig without operator response. They also do not need to notify the 811 center. And then the operator, on the, conversely, since there's no such thing as an emergency ticket as a statutory entity and related to their responsibilities, they treat it as a normal ticket if there's a ticket. They, of course, do not respond when there is not a ticket, as there doesn't have to be a ticket. But when there is a ticket, they have 2 days, not counting the date of notification, to respond. Per our reading of your conversations over the meetings over the last couple years, we haven't considered a couple things in this staff report, and just wanted to clarify what is and isn't. First, we haven't considered the definition of an emergency. We haven't considered who is able to use the exemption and who shouldn't be able to use the exemption, nor have we considered the ability of the excavator to dig prior to operator response in an emergency. We have a series of questions at the end of the staff report, and they boil down to these. First, should emergency excavations require 811 notification? If so, should all emergency excavations require 811 notification? And if not, how would we make the distinction about which excavation should require and which should not? And then second, if operators or if excavators should make 811 notifications in an emergency, how should the operators respond? Should they always have to respond? If not, when would they not respond? And should they respond faster than the legal start date and time? Or should it be left to their discretion as it currently is in law? In the staff report, we also bring up a couple considerations when having this discussion. I think these are in part related to some of the public comment we heard about clarity. So would the excavator know what they're supposed to do in the cases of whether or not they notify 811? Does the operator have the same understanding? And thus, is it enforceable? If there's a lack of clarity, there's a risk of it not being enforceable. And then conversely, if we were to say maybe the operator should be required to respond faster than the legal start date and time, could that affect excavator behavior? If the operator has to respond faster, could the excavator decide that they're more interested in putting in emergencies, even if they're not necessarily emergencies? So things to consider in this, and following your discussion, staff hopes to understand whether we're ready to draft a proposed recommendation to the governor and legislature for your consideration and action. And happy to answer your questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Marino. We'll move to public comments first. Any public comments on emergency excavation notification and exemptions? Or just in general, item number 10. Go ahead, Mr. Wingate.
Hi, James Wingate, USA North 811. I just wanted to mention what you already know, but this is an issue that is happens in the field every day, emergency tickets every single day. And, the way, whether we like it or not at the One Call Centers, we are asked to interpret this part of the law frequently. And that's challenging for us, where we recognize we don't have legal authority to tell anyone to do anything. I mean, we point them to the place, but we recognize we have no authority to enforce. But one of the challenges we hear is situations, a car crashed into a power pole. They've got to replace that pole. How long can they let it sit before they have to dig, before they're worried about that falling down, especially if it's windy? Water line is broken and flooding. They're worried about the road having a sinkhole and swallowing a car if it goes too long. Lots of situations where the utility operator, who is acting as the excavator in this case to repair their own facility, has to make the call about how long they can wait before they just have to start digging. And so when they say, well, who's going to be liable in this situation? And my interpretation, just James, not even USA North specifically or any other parties, is that, the exemption says you're not going to get you out of being fined for not creating a ticket should you decide to dig this way. But that doesn't mean you're not going to be liable for other damages that you cause as you're digging down to repair that water line if you cut other utilities, right? So that's a lot of sticky situations that happen. And so some states have in their laws that an emergency ticket should be created as soon as practical or something like that. And then the utility operators, but as Mr. Marino mentioned, what's the burden on the utility operators about how fast they will respond? I remember one situation in particular in Utah where they were looking at 3 hours for the time frame about an emergency ticket had to be responded to in 3 hours. And a rural telecom said, look, our office is here. If there's an emergency over here, it takes us 4 hours to drive there. Even if we responded immediately in the middle of the night, we can't physically get to that location, never mind the time to round up equipment and whatever else they need. So finding the timeline is going to be a challenge. But you might consider something along the lines of they have to at least communicate to the excavator that they've received it and give them some advice, or not give advice, but establish communication, I guess. You might consider something along those lines. But I would recommend something, and this may require legislation, but something that specifies once all operators have responded, then it's okay for the excavator to dig. Because again, every day we have this happening where there's an emergency ticket put in because excavators trying to do the right thing. Utility operator wants to notify, and once everyone has responded, let's say it's in a few hours, and they start digging, well, that is before the legal start time. So are they in violation of that? And I think you as regulators and the other regulatory agencies turn a blind eye at that because they recognize the spirit of the law is you don't dig until everyone's responded. But it would be nice, in my opinion, to have that be spelled out either in legislation or regulation to say that the excavator can start digging once they've had a response from all operators that gives that's a response that enables them to dig. Thank you.
Are there any other public comments?
Hi, Steve Cleaver from PG&E again. I would first say that I appreciate the creation of an emergency ticket by the one-call centers. I think it's very helpful for the excavator in signaling their intent to dig prior to the opportunity to get a normal notice ticket done. And also for the excavator for taking the initiative to call and to perform that activity. I would just continue to highlight the importance as laid out in the report around identifying all of the potential unintended consequences of establishing timelines associated with these. I think James laid it out fairly well in saying that there are times that, given the location that a ticket is being created from the rest of the services, that a specific timeline, it would be difficult to meet those requirements. And that currently the calling during emergencies essentially is a courtesy and a safety mechanism for the excavator. It's not required for them to do it. They're doing it to make sure that their workforce is safe and to ensure that there's no interruption to utilities. But in looking at the challenges of this, this is a topic I'm grateful that the board is taking on and exploring. But I see many unintended consequence tripwires out there that if we take this action, then this is a negative piece here. So certainly asking the board to be diligent in exploring this, because I think that there is great upside. But just being methodical with the approach to make sure that we're looking out for the potential unintended consequences of, as pointed out earlier, folks calling in an emergency ticket that's not really an emergency, just to accelerate the timeline that has an associated timeline attached to it, and then driving up the number of emergencies that don't necessarily need to be there. So just looking at all of the different things, I think that it is a worthwhile approach to bring this up at board level, but also going to be very difficult. Thank you very much.
Any other public comments? Rain, are there any webinar comments?
Yes, we have a comment from Eric Metzger from Charge EPC.
Go ahead.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. My comment is pretty straightforward. I think any and every time we're going to dig in the ground, we call in a ticket regardless. That there have to be clear definitions on emergencies, as Steve had just mentioned. But once they're there, I'm going to excavate as quickly as possible if I have leaking gas or some other critical facility that needs to be responded to. But it does not relieve me from the responsibility of making that ticket right away, regardless of whether I'm going to execute work immediately, which is outside of the parameters, of course. But once we have a clearly defined emergency where you can't use it because you forgot to call something in or you're not getting the responses, then I think we'll be clear on that. And the reason I'm really clear about this is I think technology is actually going to catch up to our ability to be able to get these tickets cleared quicker and quicker. There's so much stuff coming over the horizon that's going to speed up the ability to locate these things in a more timely fashion. And I honestly, I believe at some point it'd almost be a self-locating capability, but I know that's in the future. But I think we always have to put in a ticket regardless. In my company, we do, and I think it should be mandatory for any and every excavator. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other webinar comments?
There are no other webinar comments at this time.
Okay, let's turn it over to the board. Who'd like to start the discussion?
Member Johns, don't want to beat a dead horse, but I really concur with what's been talked about, the importance of a ticket, the documentation process, and then I think primarily is the communication. The call center is, like you said, Mr. Wingate, that you don't have really authority to make people do it, but I guess we can help with that. But you are communicators, and when there's an issue going on, for knowing whose number to call, what comes up when you're in an emergency situation, the more information, the better. And then, so I think we need to take this seriously. And also there are those trip wires. We need to look at it closely because there's a lot to it. But I would like to see us document it, be it as a ticket, be an emergency ticket in its own that has special requirements. Might just be a matter of saying, we've acknowledged that we've received it. We do have lines in the area. We can't get out there, but proceed with caution. Here's my phone number would be a great start. So I think coming up with a system would be beneficial in improving how it is now.
Member Voss here. I want to say thank you to staff. I appreciate the report and the examples that were presented today and the comments from Mr. Wingate, Mr. Cleaver, and the fellow online. I appreciate the fact that the law is a little vague right now, and there's some wiggle room in it. And my involvement in other laws, I appreciate it when there's wiggle room. What I guess is not clear in my mind is, how much abuse is occurring here. And being that I had a similar incident personally, being at a site where a road was going to get undermined and the authority over the road there wasn't able to get to it, called in an emergency ticket. And of course, as in some of the stories that were presented here, there was a lag time, right? And called in as an emergency ticket. Lo and behold, by the time the piece of equipment got there, because of what was going on in the area, the utility got there, was able to mark the site because it was happening all over this particular area. And again, that's just one instance where I've really felt that the emergency ticket served its purpose there. Although there was no requirement to call in, it was a smart thing to do, right? To put the notification. So I'm all ears and very open to this, but the document here that's been presented today shows where the tripwires could be as you start, someone on site is making the decision that, whatever's going on there, it's more important that we stop what's going on and take the risk of damaging another facility. And that's not an easy decision for anybody to make, but that's the situation you get put in. And so we need to appreciate that. And hopefully most of the time that was the right decision for what was going on. But I'll be interested to see how maybe something more defined with 811 and that we can look at, because I'm not set anywhere at the moment. So thank you.
Member Johnson, I'm not sure in terms of, I understand what an emergency is based on what's in 4216, and I think it's clear, be defined. So I'm kind of confused why nobody is clear on what an emergency is. I do agree that there are a whole lot of companies out there calling in emergencies that are not fall under this definition. And then there are emergency situations that do. I do know that the utilities have an agreement amongst themselves, quiet as is kept, that we will respond within 2 hours, and or we have contact information to contact each other about what facilities are available out there. I do know that not all utilities or operators are staffed 24/7, and so that 2 hour limit or no response, particularly on weekends, may not happen. And I do know if there is a true emergency that an excavator can't wait. They have to be very cautious, overly cautious now in this case, and do their due diligence of walking the area, finding out what's out there, and making phone calls. But I do agree that there should be a ticket. But in terms of, an emergency is an emergency. And we all know what it is. We know how to get around it if we want to. And I think that's more of the issue is getting those who are taking advantage of the situation and addressing those situations. And then if there's a true emergency and the operator has a damaged facility or pole, like Mr. Wingate mentioned, if a pole is hit and hitting in the middle of the street and the wires are loose, nobody can wait. The power company has to get out there and do what they have to do to remove the pole and stop the electricity from running, or depower it, whatever they call it. So, and if it's a water situation, same thing for water. There's laws within the state from Water Resources that water can't be running forever because of the water resources that we have. And then from a telecom perspective, there's regulation by the PUC in this case that they have to follow and get customers restored within X amount of hours and communication up and running. So, again, I think more enforcement based on the emergency itself and just making sure that people are not taking advantage of that situation should be addressed.
All right. And just to kind of build off of that, the 4216F1, emergency means a sudden unexpected occurrence involving a clear and imminent danger, demanding immediate action to prevent or mitigate loss of or damage to life, health, property, or essential public services. Although that may appear clear, it is not all that clear, considering if I feel like my basement getting flooded is an emergency because it's my property that gets lost, there's different degrees, right? So that is a very hard one to explain to a homeowner, right? Versus like a main is shooting off and now this whole area is flooded. There's no fire safety. There's degrees, right? And I don't know I think that's more of along the lines of what this report's trying to uncover is how do we help all levels of business? Because it's not just big businesses that have to respond. It's the little ones. It's like a sole proprietor, right? To them, it is an emergency because they have to they don't have a huge ability of cash on hand. They have to solve problems right then and there. So it's not saying the intent of this is not to define an emergency from right now. We're just saying that we've seen these cases before us where there's the perspective of who's being interviewed is different. So I think this is a good topic to go back to the call centers and get that feedback from the 811 notification centers. And I think it is a topic. I think you list 4 of them that we've looked at before, and there are variations on the approach, on the way that people responded. And I think you did a good job on the last page of looking at the other states, that emergency tickets in other areas, and other states such as Virginia and Maryland both require an emergency ticket upon discovering or causing damage to underground utilities in Oregon, an emergency ticket is not required. I tend to like having a ticket for everything so that we have a record, but I think it's a good discussion, and I think it's good to look at what are the pros and cons in those areas. Like, this is just, this is a quick high-level summary, but I think having a more in-depth discussion and maybe talking to them, what are the benefits that they see in these two scenarios might be helpful. And the time frame we've talked about, Mr. Wingate brought up, is pretty important as well, right? So I think we talked about that when we were back in our workshop discussions, and Deborah was still our attorney. We spent a lot of time on time frame. So I think, and then even today we had comments about not everything is an emergency. So there is a clear indication that in life in general, my kids think everything's an emergency, right? So just sometimes things just need like the boundaries drawn, and I think that's what we've seen in a lot of the cases that are being handled. So I think the board's recommendation is fair. What are you guys looking for a timeline from us? What support do you need, and when will this item come back?
So on the last one, don't have a timeline yet for it to come back. I think it depends on how complicated it gets. But I think what we're hoping to get a sense from the board is just to kind of separate the two particular issues. Should the, not changing the definition of emergency, should excavators be required to make 811 notifications when they're digging, even if it is an emergency? And then once we understand that, we can look at the second part about how should an operator respond. And if you're not prepared to say whether or not you agree with that yet, what kind of information would you need?
Mr. Marino, member Voss here. Right now in statute, there's no requirement to call on a ticket. Is that correct?
If it's an emergency, that you do not need to contact 811, correct?
Okay.
So I think there's some other elements that play a role here that I think everyone's kind of alluded to is the communication, right? So in some businesses, it's bigger and they have a person to talk to. Like members John was saying, they may proceed, but have a contact and be able to talk to them and kind of negotiate all this stuff. But as an earlier report said, when you guys were trying to follow up with non-EPR responses, there wasn't always a good contact. So I think we have a huge spectrum of what's available for information and communication. So I think more information is probably needed together because we need to consider the big companies and the little companies. And we've heard from the call centers, they're not always updating all their information. So if the key is communicating, there's some precursors that are already plaguing us now. If we're gonna, that may play into how we make our decisions.
So I guess what I'm wondering is, it sounds like we're thinking about the life cycle of the emergency. And if the excavator does make an 811 notification, are all the operators prepared to respond to it? Given different sizes of operators, different situations, and some of them just not having good contact information anyway. I guess I don't know that we need to worry yet about the operator response because we can handle the operator response in different ways. And so, I guess the question is in all cases, should the excavator contact 811 if they're going to dig in an emergency. In the staff report, we identify one issue which may cause complications, which is the probing rod, which is an excavation, which the board has looked at before and found that, in a particular instance, it was done in an emergency. We've heard from the public about, in a situation like that, if there was an 811 notification, that it would create complications, not necessarily in the notification itself, but in how is the operator supposed to respond to it. So I guess what information, are you comfortable saying that excavators need to contact 811 in an emergency, allowing for different operator responses, which we can figure out down the line? Or are there instances where you think it does not make sense for an excavator to contact 811? I think that's maybe the first question. In the staff report, we're identifying two particular values of the 811 notification. The first is what we usually talk about, that the operator has an opportunity to go out and identify the location of their lines. The other, which I think Member Johns alluded to, was that the excavator gets information about what operators are in the area. So I'll just, I guess, return to the question. Are you comfortable suggesting that all excavations, even emergency, should contact 811, or are there ones that they shouldn't contact 811?
Excuse me, Member Sherlin. Yeah, I'm in favor of having a ticket. However, I don't think we stop a true emergency. And when Marshall was reading in the law how clear that is, well, if you go by that definition, and I think most people, and it's a blowing gas main, a hydrant broke, and there's water just flooding. I mean, everybody could see that that's clearly an emergency, and they need to get out there and do what they need to do, especially the gas one. Get too much gas, there's going to be another, possibly a catastrophe that happens. So having the ticket, I think that's always good, because I think even if you're responding, and by the way, responding, we got to look at also, is responding out on site? You're there to mark, you're there to talk with them, or is responding making a phone call, right? Which everybody should be able to respond within a fast time, at least by a phone call, say, and give an ETA when they're going to be there, or, are they looking at something where, hey, we have no issue based on our maps. But I just want to make clear that I don't think we should ever have it where the ability of the excavator to do what he needs to do on a true emergency. Having said that, we also have to address non-emergencies. And in my experience, and I agree with the staff contacting the board of the 2 one-call centers, they can get this information that I remember in the past, emergencies are out of hand at a location. They said, hey, we're going to put out a notice that says, if this is not an emergency, you are going to be charged. Their emergencies dropped, which shows you people when they're, taking a look at, oh, shoot, I'm going to say this is an emergency, but I might have to pay for this. They chose not to do it. So there is ways that if there's a, enforcement side to this, that you can get, I think, truer emergencies than is just, there's no consequence if you call one in because you just want a quicker response.
I'm sorry, Member Johnson. I do agree in terms of possible tickets, but not stop them from proceeding if it's a true emergency. So, ticket. I do know that I required all my contractors to issue an emergency ticket and to not move forward until they heard a response back. I've had other fellow utilities that found out they made phone calls as soon as they got the ticket and told them if it's not an emergency that they will be charged for it. And again, at that point in time, the ticket was canceled. And so they're trying to do is, minimize unnecessary dispatches out there, because a lot of resources are being wasted, particularly in the wee hours of the night, or just to get someone out there just because. And so in some cases you do, and in some cases, I remember there was some discussion about what's in the law in terms of my basement's flooding. If your basement's flooding, it's covered property. If your property is flooded and it's an emergency and it requires excavation, then you are legitimately calling in the right ticket. So, but in terms of a ticket, I think you can, but it doesn't preclude you from not moving forward to do what you got to do and deal with your emergencies, because some other utilities are held based on regulation that they must proceed and do what they got to do, and they have to proceed accordingly and safely.
So should we just take a quick vote? Because it seems like every time we say this, it's connected to call everyone, but that was my caveat, is not everyone has good contact. So let's just take it one step at a time.
Well, maybe it would just be good to hear from all members to get their take without any sort of formal or informal action.
Yeah, no formal action, but just, it sounds like Charland, Johns, and Johnson are in agreement that we should have a ticket for everything. Emergency as well. A ticket, but not necessarily any other action yet. What about you, Member Voss?
Member Voss, I am in favor of a ticket as long as it doesn't confuse the issue. I think, again, I agree with the definition that's currently in place. Having a ticket there is an opportunity to see what operators have facilities in the area, depending on how pinpointed the problem is located, right? Because I guess I give the broad example. If you're in the middle of an agricultural field, right, you wouldn't expect any operators to show up. But trying to describe what that emergency would look like is kind of hard. But the one thing about getting a ticket, all of a sudden you get notified. You get notification of what operators might be in the area.
Okay,
so would I be in favor of a ticket? Yes.
Okay, so it sounds like we're all in agreement with that. And then the other question that he had was, or Mr. Marino had, was whether there's a set individuals allowed to use those emergency exemptions, or is it just the definition of the emergency?
So I'm not sure that we're proposing to delve into changing the definition, including saying that some people are able to use the emergency notification and others are not. One of the things we found in looking at other states was that other states often limited emergencies to only operators could have emergencies. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure, given the discussion, you want to go that direction. I do think that that there are potentially options to limit the amount of time when somebody knows that it's not an emergency but puts in an emergency ticket anyway. Right now, you don't really have to say why it's an emergency in your ticket. Maybe that's a start. So I guess, what I'm hearing is that the board members are generally comfortable with requiring a notification for each excavation, including an emergency. I think where it gets a little trickier, and we'll want to get your feedback, is how should an operator respond? So currently, an operator has to respond within 2 working days, not counting the date of excavation. or date of notification to any ticket. This would count for an emergency ticket. Some operators, when they get an emergency ticket, go out immediately. Some don't. And so currently, operators have discretion about whether or not they want to respond to the emergency ticket immediately. Now, does the board think that that's an appropriate approach, or do they want to have more prescription on whether an operator should respond faster, on the one hand? On the other hand, should the operator respond at all? If there is an emergency excavation, the excavation is complete, does the operator respond 2 days later with locate and mark? I bring that up knowing that it's going to be difficult to tell whether or not the excavation is complete. And so maybe we can get some discussion, maybe on that second part first, whether an operator should not have to mark if the excavation is complete.
Member Voss here, if you, out of courtesy, turn in an emergency ticket today, there probably isn't any requirement for the operator to respond at all now.
They have to respond because they put in a notification, and it's not, their statutory responsibilities have nothing to do with whether or not it's an emergency. So they have to treat it as a normal ticket and respond within 2 days, not counting the date of notification.
So who decided there was an emergency ticket when it wasn't required at all?
I think, and I don't know if it's our call centers or other call centers, just found that there was value in saying, hey, I got to dig, and having excavators do that. And so operators could respond if they could. I think it was an operational decision and not a legal decision.
Right, so it was made outside of regulation. And it's caused another problem.
Well, back in the day, it was very useful, right? So like someone hit a hydrant, you called, you let them know. And so from an operational perspective.
But the problem is the 48 hours doesn't line up with when they really need the response.
Yeah. So this goes back to why I brought this up, is because it sounds like so far 2 of us have said that if it's not really an emergency, they can be charged. So is there an element that would reduce the amount of non-emergencies from coming through, or a reflection period of like, is this really an emergency, or am I just trying to expedite this?
Member Voss, I got statistically on tickets that have been called in an emergency, do we have any statistics on how many other facilities got damaged in the process?
I think they exist in part through damage tickets, but I wouldn't necessarily trust that we have a complete data set.
Member Sharlin, kind of thinking back about emergency versus a non-emergency. It's real clear to me that if you do not send your own crew, that's not an emergency. And those are happening today, where they go out, evaluate. It might even be a gas leak in some situations, but a water leak, and they're saying, I'm going to call this an emergency, but we're actually not going to fix it till, the next day or even later. And that, to me, I don't believe is an emergency when you're not even going to send your own crews. But going back to the ticket, and do we mark the ticket? I say we mark the ticket. It's required to mark the ticket unless the ticket is canceled. And that's how clear it should be, not trying to figure out any other way to get out of this or not have to respond. And responding, I believe, should be also contacting them. And like Member Voss said, maybe they're working in a field and they can explain that to them, and you can clear it over the phone just like you can now, or a long-distance carrier can clear a ticket over the phone. But there has to be that communication. If you cannot get that communication, the ticket is still valid, it gets marked. Because there is a cancel ticket where they can cancel it if they're not going to do it no more, or if it was complete. Say they got out there and they finished it, and they can, the work is done.
I just notified our call centers that we might want them to add some things to their notification report for next time.
So Member Johns, kind of in answer to your kind of prompting of the board, I definitely think we need to address a ticket, an emergency ticket. If I were to just, top of my head say, I envision that ticket being different, something you're going to be checking saying this is an emergency. It changes the rules, which we need to further study and understand. That's where all those slip-ups. But the fact of after something's been repaired does not mean that there were no damages there. There's, in the steel pipeline world, there's coatings and things like that of people's lines that have been damaged, or conduits that have been cracked and damaged, and just because it's been buried and they're done doesn't mean that it didn't affect others. So I think my kind of recommendation to the board, to the staff, is let's look at a ticket, let's look at all the scenarios, and then address it with the excavators and the operator community, and let's see if we can come up with a solution, including the definition of an emergency. So it's taken on a lot of things.
So then I have a question. Would all emergency tickets then have a damage ticket associated?
Not all emergencies are related to subsurface installations. And even if they are, they might not be related to subsurface installations covered. They might be related to buried facilities, but that are not considered subsurface installations. There was an investigation where it was determined that a French drain needs to be cleared, which caused an investigation. So there would be no damage ticket associated with that. In California, we have wildfires and we have bulldozers that clear vegetation in advance of those. And so that would not require a damage ticket.
So then maybe all emergencies need tickets, but not all emergency tickets need a damage ticket to close. The exemption's on the back end instead of the front end.
I mean, damage tickets are their own non-statutory entity.
Well, if we're changing it all, we could change it all, right?
Madam Chair, I have a question. Is it a possibility that on emergency tickets to kind of resolve or look at the issue with if the work's already completed, if the initiator of the one call ticket, if we create or come up with an EPR code that if the work is complete, that an EPR code be assigned to it, and if it's prior to the 48 hours, that the operator can not respond at that time or close it with one of the existing EPR codes. Can we look at something like that?
I think that's potentially something for the ticket committee, all one of them to consider. But once you do that, we are talking about a two-way positive response.
So Member Charlin said that your recommendation was that a locate has to go out for every emergency regardless, or they could cancel the ticket if they've done it already?
I guess the way I look at it is if it's a true emergency and it goes out to all the members and they're responding as soon as they can, which is, I'm not thinking 2 days, I'm thinking within 4 hours, just in my mind. Everybody's marking. Everybody needs to mark by that 4 hours. If for some reason they don't need everybody, they can cancel the ticket. Otherwise, everybody's going to respond because they're going to be out there working this ticket. And they're going to do what they need to do to, cap off the gas if it's the gas that's blowing. But if this excavation gets bigger and they're having to dig and you get out there, you're able to give them more information. Since you're out there, they're doing what they need to do, but you're now able to say, hey, I'm out here. You have this, backbone communication line that's over here that we need to, you can start giving them information as this thing's going on. But within this, whatever that time frame is, they don't need anybody no more. I think it needs to be canceled. Otherwise, we're going to respond within that time and mark.
Madam Chair, my only issue with the 4-hour response is that in some cases, the operators are in kind of trying to get the resources, and it may take them 4 hours to get the resource. Yeah. And then time they get it and get back to the office and start rolling, then the ticket's canceled, and they have to compensate that particular worker. So I don't know if canceling is the right thing to do. Maybe, like I said, come up
with a new. Yeah, I don't know if canceling is right because something happened. There was a damage. So in those cases, does the emergency ticket also get that's the part. That's why I asked that question. If it gets a damage ticket because they're repairing it and it's already repaired.
Yeah, and I think that there's a possibility even, we don't necessarily have to have the two-way communication, but the operator should be able to go in, add a step to go into the one call center, check the status of a ticket. I think they have the act to go and check the status of the ticket with an EPR code that designates that this work is complete. So before they dispatch a roll in, they can check that, or I don't know, be a step that they need to add to the process.
Member Charlin, just to go on the record, I'm not saying 4 hours. That was just kind of an example because I do agree. Damages or emergencies do not always happen in the most convenient locations. They can happen anywhere, and it does take time to get to some locations or where your work staff is. So I'm not putting a time down other than I don't personally feel 2 full days would be an adequate response time to an emergency.
Okay, so I guess, Mr. Marino, we've given you a lot of discussion. Some of it is in alignment with previous discussions we had, and some of it seems to tease out the fact that we like tickets for all emergencies, but we're not really quite sure how to resolve them once they're in the queue. And then there might be a future discussion of the link of an emergency to a damage.
I think this is enough for staff to go on. One of the things that I'm thinking about in particular is if we're worried about people putting in tickets, emergency tickets for things that are not emergencies. And from a changing statute point of view, that only really creates a problem if we decide that operators have to respond in a more 2 hours, 4 hours, or whatever. Otherwise, the change to the statute doesn't affect the problem that people are putting in emergency tickets for non-emergency work. So I do think that there are ways to at least start to address the people putting in emergency tickets for non-emergency work. I think a first step is they have to state what the nature of their emergency is. Mm-hmm. But maybe those could be considered separately. And so if the board is comfortable leaving at the operator discretion of how fast to respond within those 2 days, not counting the date of notification, then I think we can keep those separate, and I think we have enough to present something to you perhaps in July.
Okay, and then there's one more element. I just had a flashback of a tiny crew of 2 located mark guys going out, and one of the experiences that we would have is that maybe we had one guy and we missed the 2 day, And instead of, like we called and we told them, hey, we're running behind or whatever. And then the very day that they go past the 2, they put a bunch of them in as emergency, right? And it's probably because it's backed up from some other area. So how do you so there might be another issue that might be the late tickets now are being pushed in as emergency when they're not truly emergency. So maybe there's a separate pathway that is an issue that may not be addressing the root cause. So that's a whole separate issue on the late side. Just make sure that we leave that one separate, because that may be that was the whole reason why people put emergency tickets in, is because they went past the 2 days. Not that that's a great reason, but, that's the limited resource issue.
Yeah, I think that falls into the concern that Mr. Wingate brought up a while ago related to excavator lack of confidence in the system. And that is, I think, what the ticket process committee is looking at when it comes to volatility. That if we can knock down the volatility, then if you are late and the state has done everything it can to address the volatility issue, then it's probably a resource issue. So I think that does fall into the ticket process committee discussions on volatility.
Okay. All right, so we've covered 10. I think you have everything you need. We're good, so we'll move on to item 11. And item 11 is an information item on electronic positive response audits. So staff will discuss recent advisory letters sent to Dig Alert members regarding their compliance with the EPR. So Ms. Branneman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Previous board and 811 notification center analysis has indicated significant noncompliance among operators in the requirement to provide electronic positive response to 811 notifications. Staff requested EPR data from Dig Alert and USA North to address this concern. At the time of the request, USA North data was unavailable. So staff moved forward with sending 469 Dig Alert utility operators advisory letters who had not been compliant with this requirement at least 50% of the time during the first half of 2023. Responses from utility operator representatives demonstrated a significant lack of knowledge of their responsibilities under the law. Staff received 129 Dig Alert members' representatives' responses, primarily to the emails that were sent rather than the letters. The email responses could be categorized into the following buckets. We received responses about these lines no longer belong to us or they're abandoned. This individual that we sent the letter to no longer works for this organization or they retired. Most of the responses we received was, why does this apply to me? What is this? How can we be in compliance? There was a few questions regarding territory boundaries and how to update shapefiles. So I was able to speak with 149 representatives. A few representatives were from the same organization, and we sorted out their concerns through multiple conversations. And I will say Dig Alert was amazing in this exercise. Their member services really helped overcome a lot of these representatives' concerns. So my big takeaways from those conversations was, number one, I'm really happy to report that almost everyone I spoke to really wanted to comply. They were concerned about the safety issues that were raised, and they just wanted to know what they needed to do for their organization to sort this out. Number two, I don't think this is a surprise, but we received a lot of responses to the emails we sent and not necessarily the snail mail letters that we sent. So moving forward, I think email is definitely an option that we're going to deploy. One of the big things that I heard was that the 811 responsibilities in the utility member representatives organizations was not proceduralized. So when someone left, there was a knowledge gap, that information wasn't passed down on how to interact in this process. Many representatives didn't know the individual that the letter was addressed to or who was getting the emails from DigAlert. And so there was questions on how they could access their account, go in and look at this information and make sure that contact information was updated. A few members believed that the DigAlert fee that they paid was for DigAlert to do the locate and field mark. So explaining the locate and field mark and then the EPR requirement after that was a conversation that I had a few times. And then some people did express that they didn't believe that they needed to be DigAlert members. So overall, I will say that the experience, I think, was really positive, and I definitely am grateful that I was able to speak to so many individuals and that they really wanted to be compliant. And I think that it's representative of what Member Bianchini said at our last education and outreach meeting, that he expressed a concern that not all of the education out there is focused towards operators and their requirements and their responsibilities, and that it demonstrates that many of the issues, there may be a knowledge gap amongst the operators. There's the large outfits that have the resources, the time, money, and staff to understand their legal obligations, and then the smaller organizations that might not have as many resources available to them to understand how they need to interact in this law. So staff expects to perform a similar exercise with USA North's data that we do have now, and so we'll be running that advisory letter audit in the future for Northern California. So overall, staff recommends that the board consider and discuss with the 811 Notification Center's methods to assess and improve the knowledge of 811 Notification Center members and their responsibilities under the law. Staff also recommends that the board consider how to understand and address the obligation of non-operator 811 Notification Center members in future membership related regulations. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We will turn it over to public for public comment.
Good afternoon. Chairman Cal again from Port Long Beach. And I'm proud to say that we are one of the members that's newly using the positive response systems there. I would like to I'm here to ask a suggestions for the response system. Our staff do respond, especially on the note part, who did it, what we mark, and such. But there's two particular items that I indicate my staff to definitely put on the note is when there's no delineations, make sure it's on the note that we visit the sites, there's no delineations. The second item is if the tickets indicate as emergency, and then we find out that's not emergency, we'll definitely note that it's not emergency because the diggers excavator over there is saying we just forgot to put in a ticket. Now, it'll be easier if there's such field or maybe pops up checkbox if it's delineated. If it's emergency, is it yes or no, and why? That will help us to make sure that those comments are in the response system. And perhaps maybe that would be part of your statistics to find out what is all the responses, emergency responses out there. Thank you.
Mr. Wingate?
James Wingate, USA North 811. I just want to say that I'm open to the idea of modifying questions that we ask in an emergency. We do read the definition of an emergency to the excavator and make them agree that it meets the definition. But we have not captured why. We've just made them say yes, no, and if it's no, then we do a regular ticket, and if it's yes, and sometimes they hear that, and we emphasize sudden, unexpected, because the most frequent complaint we get is about the leaking water line that's a slow drip, and the plumber says, hey, I can fix this for you right now, and it's been leaking for months, so we would consider that not to be sudden or unexpected. But again, we're not attorneys, so we don't try to interpret too much. But, I like drop downs so that we can have data drop down menus. So if we had something like reasons for an emergency, and one was property damage to prevent, whatever list you want, and we would want to be on the same page with Dig Alert, of course, but something along the lines where we could report X number of emergencies are happening for this reason, and could we tie those to some other stat later on about damages that happen after, or if the excavator said they had to dig sooner before utilities could respond, such as that water line that's flooding out the road that they really can't wait for, or the live power cables on the road that Member Johnson mentioned. But I think that could be valuable data for us, and I'm open to modifying our procedures and ticket system to capture that data if we need to.
Any other in-person comments? Rain, are there any webinar comments?
At present, there are no webinar comments.
Okay, let's move on to board discussion. Who'd like to start the discussion?
I just want to commend staff on the results. To make that many calls, and that's a lot of calls, talk to that many people, and get the results that you did. I'm excited about that. So hopefully you'll have to make 200 more, 300 more each month. So.
Member Voss, of course, what's telling again is that of all the outreach that was done years ago and the year extension that was given, that you're still have folks out there that aren't aware of the requirement. So I feel their pain coming from the ag side.
Is there anything you need from us to help support what you're working on now? I know that you've had a lot of meaningful discussions. We've had enforcement items that came before us that you shared. What do you need from us to help support this? Is there enough teeth for you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe at this time, the big workload was developing a framework and making sure that we would have a strong framework in place so we could utilize the resources that we had available to us properly. So when NOPVs come in front of the board for action, that we have met the legal requirements so they are enforceable. I'm eager to run this in the north and see the response that we get, and then to follow this cadence. So I believe at this time we have all that we need.
Member Foster again, Ms. Brannaman. The one thing I would, I know in your report here you said that you got a better response from the email. The snail mail was lacking. But looking back at some of our previous cases, you probably still need to have both. just an observation.
I know we have a small staff, but is there a way to partner with the call centers to point? I know they have training already kind of set up. And have you already done that? Have you pointed back toward the call center to say, hey, here's what's required?
I will say that the partnership with the call centers has been great and definitely directed a lot of the Dig Alert members back to Dig Alert Member Services, who was very responsive, and they worked hand in hand to overcome those questions. This was the first one, so we did learn, from it. And when I issue it again in the north, there will be an attachment to the letter with resources available explaining operators' EPR requirement and where they could go if they have questions on how they need to update their account, hoping that that might reduce some of the phone calls and emails that we received.
And what about the members or the people that you talked to that said they didn't need to be members? How did they come back to the fold? Or
I directed to those individuals to Dig Alert Member Services.
Okay. I see smiles over there, so I'm guessing that everything went very well after that. Okay. All right. Are there any other discussion topics on this one? All right, so let's move on to item number 12, which is board member public engagement reports. We'll go over any public engagement reports from the board regarding any relevant experience with the public related to the Board of Safe Excavation Practices. Ask if any members, have you guys done any public engagement? Sounds like you might have done some of the Farm Bureau stuff.
Member Voss, Madam Chair, no, nothing this quarter.
I kind of do some minor things. I tend to hoard all of the gift bags from the Dig Alert, and I give them away at kids' events so that it inspires their parents. It's always surprising when the parents say, "But why do I have to call? It's my own property," right? So the kids this time got roller skating bags. They're just the Dig Alert bags, the canvas bags. They're so nice, and they hold really nicely up with the skates and helmets and pads. So I gave about 60 of those away, and with pop sockets and some of the other things. So if any of the call centers want to give me stuff, I'm always out in the public giving things away. And I like to give them to the kids because there's also the topic of they don't know what they're going to do when they grow up. And I'm always like, you could be an excavator and play in the dirt all the time. It's so fun. Most of the time they just look at me like, that's a job? Yeah, it's a job. So I think it's a good discussion, but it's something so tiny and so small, and I see them using them all the time. So people ask, why do you have a shovel on the back of it has like the little shovel on the back of the pop socket. They're like, why do you have a shovel there? So I think it's a good conversation. So maybe the rest of you guys want to join in giving away items to the public. It's really fun. So that's all I have. All right, so I can turn it over to public comments. Do you guys have any comments of anything you want to invite us to? Any fun events where we can give away fun things? Okay. Well, any webinar comments? All right. So with that, I saw a head nod. So Rain, sorry, I didn't hear you. Yeah, he said no. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to item number 13, which is the executive officer's report. Mr. Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Short executive officer's report, only have one item, which is hiring updates. And I will turn it over first to Anona, our policy manager.
The policy team has hired 2 additional policy analysts, Chris Peary and Evan Newsom. Chris graduated from Sac State with a master's in chemistry. He has worked in a couple labs and has dealt with aquatic health and cancer diagnostics. He is excited to use his accumulated research skills as he digs into the Locate Work Volatility Policy Initiative. Evan has 19 years of experience in the telecommunications industry, working with site operations to ensure comfort and safety of employees, to working in field services where he spent time troubleshooting outside plant issues, looking for damaged facilities, reviewing maps of the company's infrastructure, and assisting with repair efforts after cable damages. He hopes to bring his familiarity with buried facilities along with his education and professional training as he digs into potholing and planning and design policy initiatives. And that's my update.
And I do believe our Assistant Executive Officer for Education and Enforcement also has an update.
Thank you, Mr. Moreno. Madam Chair, members of the board, I am thrilled to announce that we hired a Chief of Investigations, and Ms. Anona Bonner has promoted into that role and will be joining investigations April 15th.
And in addition to your call for staff, so that means the policy manager. We're also looking for that position. And that's all that I have.
All right, we'll open it up to the public in person. And Rain, any webinar comments? Okay, that's a no. So we'll go to board.
At this time, there are no webinar comments.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. I was watching your head, so you know. All right, any board discussion items? Any comments? This is very exciting news. I'm super excited. And it's really awesome. That's not too often that policy gets to become enforcement. That's very rare. So you're in a super awesome, unique position. So congratulations.
Member Johns, just one thing, missing Member Bianchini, but do want to just say that he was an important member of our group and really enjoyed having him. And we will miss him and just appreciated all he did.
Yeah, that was a surprise. So we are looking for someone that represents excavators to fill in for Member Bianchini's spot. All right, so I think we can move on to the final item, which is adjournment. So I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you so much for coming.